Hello, welcome back again to CRS01. So now we'll be looking at the four sources, that's the JEDP sources and their characteristics. We considered what the documentary hypothesis is all about. We had the overview of the early fragmentary and the supplementary hypothesis overview. So now moving on to the JEDP sources, that's the four um other sources of the Pentateuch and their characteristics, starting with the J source. Okay, the J source, which happens to be the Yahweh source, has humanity and promise. Now, the Yahweh source is considered the oldest because it dates back to around 10th century BC, and it also uses the divine name Yahweh or God, which is portrayed in anthropomorphic term. And this J source focuses on the southern kingdom of Judah, and it also emphasizes God's closeness to humanity and the Abrahamic promise. So the characteristics of this JSOS is that 1. It uses the name Yahweh or Yahweh for God. 2. It is written in a vivid and narrative style. 3. It focuses on the southern kingdom of Judah. 4. It emphasizes the role of Judah and its king. And lastly, it often presents a more anthropomorphic view of God. So for looking at the date, which is the most important aspect, like I mentioned earlier, it dates around the 10th century BCE, and it includes stories about creation, early ancestors, and the patriarchs, as well as accounts of Israel's early history. So moving on to the next source, which is the E source, which stands for the Elohim or Eloi source. So now the Eloi source dates to the 9th century BCE and it's originated in the Northern Kingdom. Take note, in the Yahweh source or the J source, I said the it originated in the Southern Kingdom, but the Elohim source, in contrast to that, originates from the Northern Kingdom. So the E source uses Elohim, which stands for God's name, and it reflects a more abstract view of God. Now, this source often features prophetic figures, and it emphasizes moral responsibility and obedience to divine command. Now, the characteristics of this source is that 1. It uses the name Elohim for God. 2. It presents a more distant and majestic view of God. 3. It focuses on the northern kingdom of Israel. 4. It often includes prophetic figures and emphasizes the importance of prophecy. And lastly, may have been written in more formal or liturgical style. And for the dates, like I said earlier, also it dates back to the 9th century BC. And it also includes stories about the patriarchs, Moses, and the early history of Israel. And it also focuses on the northern kingdom. Now, for the third source, which happens to be the Deuteronomy source or the D source. Now, the Deuteronomy source is tied to the book of Deuteronomy and it emerged in the 7th century BC. Now, this was during the reign of King Josiah, during his reforms precisely. The D source highlights the covenant renewal and centralized worship at that time, and it also stresses the importance of the law because the book of Deuteronomy, which happens to be the D source, was found by Hilkiah the priest during the reform in the temple, and it also has a strong sermonic and legalistic tone, urging national faithfulness. So, what are the characteristics associated with the book of Deuteronomy? One is that it emphasizes the importance of covenant obedience and centralized worship. And 2, it presents a theology of retribution where God rewards faithfulness and punishes disobedience. Thirdly, it often uses sermonic or hortatory language. And lastly, may have been written during the reign of King Josiah, that's 7th century BC. So it includes the book of Deuteronomy, which presents a review of Israel's history, a restatement of the law, and a call to covenants, obedience, and repentance. Lastly, for the last source, we have the priestly source. Now, the priestly source focuses on priestly matters such as rituals and genealogies, and it presents a formal and structured view of God's relationship with Israel. So, what are the characteristics of the priestly source as we considered other characteristics of the other sources? One characteristic of the priestly source is that it emphasizes the importance of purity, holiness, and ritual observance. The second one is that it often includes detailed instructions and regulations for worship and priestly duties. And lastly, it may have been written during or after the Babylonian exile, that's around 6th century BCE. So it also includes materials on creation, genealogy, and the early history of Israel, as well as detailed instruction for the tabernacle, priestly rituals, and laws. So these sources as a whole, the four sources, they all have their unique characteristics and emphasis, which were likely compiled and edited over a period of time to form what we now have as the Pentateuch. I'll see you later in the next lesson. Thank you very much for listening.